Parliamentary Council of Australia. Peter.
Thank you very much, Tony, and to Skills Tasmania for the invitation. I'll just wait a second while people are just coming in. And also, may I also acknowledge the traditional owners of the land and thank Jackie McLean for her assistance as well. The theme is really about riding the wave, you know, this idea of getting up the surf and coming down. I think it's, you know, if you think about riding the wave, it's about learning how to swim, which board to choose, which beach, who to go with. You need good advice. And I think this part of the presentation is really around, well, if it's all about innovative career development strategies. Well, it's not, but it's part of the deal. It can be a catalyst, and that's kind of what I want to talk about. You know, moving from school to work or further education, moving from one job to another. It's becoming more of a complex process because of the choices available and the things that are happening to work itself, and I want to talk a bit about that. Because I think what's happening is that people are making changes or they're being made for them. Over the last 20 or 30 years, I've seen about 7,000 people. And when you get people in the privacy of the room and together you're working on a problem, you can see what becomes important in their lives. What are the values that are important to them? What are the skills and how do they want to use them next? And what will they do? What will they do next? So I guess the other thing that's happened is that the federal government has decided to move away from providing national career development services. From the end of this year, there'll be no more funding for programs like My Future, the Job Guide, Careers Advice for Parents, resume writing workshops, interview skills workshops, Careers Advice for mature age workers by telephone, and a range of others, dozens of other programs that the government is moving out of. And I think you could sort of say, well, what are they thinking? Well, I'd ask that question really, but then I don't come up with an answer, unfortunately. But I guess the issue is really about, is this an opportunity to design something better? And that's where I want to sort of concentrate on today. You know, if you think about it, work's important in our lives. That's why we do what we do. It's why we train people in skills. You know, the poet David White said, work is an opportunity for discovering and shaping the place where the self meets the world. The place where the self meets the world. For many of us, it's the most important place and the most important contribution we will make. The right skills combined with good career management skills open up doors, increase our networks, they decide who we meet, and impact on the income we earn, the lifestyle we live, and the work we get. This is a pretty big rock in the canister. This is a pretty important part of the deal, and getting good advice is really quite important. A few years ago, after I was made redundant at the University of Tasmania, I wrote an article for the Australian Financial Review about what it was like for a careers advisor to take his own advice. I dropped off a few pieces, kept some, and some of those I want to talk about today. Because I think that even though you know the stuff, when you're actually in the mix, when you're not sure what you're going to do next, your brain starts telling you things. Are you worthy? How good are you? Are you as good as those other people? And often we create those kind of little straw men or straw women that say, over there, that person would be, we have this fantasy of this, what a person who could do work that we want next looks like, rather than the skills we have ourselves. So I want you to think about, you know, there's a bottle. There's a lot of people being made redundant at the moment, and what I sometimes do is to write a story back to them when I work with them to tell them what I heard about their career. If that's your career in the bottle, and that beach is the start of a journey to next, what advice would you give yourself? Just want to talk to your one piece of advice to the person next to you. Just for a second. Alrighty, turns out we're all careers advisors, really. The advice, I guess, that I gave myself really was networks are really important. The people that you know, the people you can get to know, really decide sometimes. In some ways, the last 5 or 6 years of my life has resulted in employment through my networks and the people that I've got to meet. It's pretty valuable. It's paid my salary, it's allowed me to go overseas, it's done all sorts of things. So, it's interesting, not everybody who is made redundant is unhappy. I sat in a room in town last week, and what happens is, if you're an outplacement person, you go there, somebody flew in from the mainland, they said, we're going to tell him in an hour, just wait there. And so I'm the kind of good guy, I sit there, the person comes in, they're a little bit shocked, and then I say, what are you going to do for the next thing with your life? And then I work with them for a few weeks or a few months or sometimes a year, till they find something. Surprisingly, those organisations that have provided a bit of training, who have kept people's employability skills, or people who have invested in themselves, aren't waiting very long at all in this environment to find work. So the advice you've given each other is... Here's the region. Each one of those dots is 1 million people. You can see 1950, you can see by 2000, you can see by 2030. The sheer impact, the unavoidable change in structure of the global economy, which changes the way that we'll all work. It's changing now. It mightn't be that noticeable, but we're on the way. So that's the driver. That's when people talk about these big things. For some of us, we won't feel like we're affected. For others, we'll feel like, what's going on? The Australian Workplace Productivity Agency made 4 scenarios, the long boom, the ring of fire, and a number of others, which actually said, can Australia survive this? And what will change? And this is the question we need to ask. Are we providing the young people that are coming through now with the right advice to manage their future, when we know this is occurring? And a lot of the advice we're giving them is very lineal, very old hat, a bit of out of date. Because you think about work and what's happening with work. We've moved from chores, some countries still lots of chores. There's chores still waiting around my house all the time, but it's not my work. To jobs, to projects. When we move to projects, are we preparing people with the skills they need, the career management skills, to manage themselves when projects change over and over again? You used to say, 5 or 6 jobs in your life. I've had more than a dozen so far, and I'm hoping to have a few more. So it asks us to think about how we prepare people going forwards. And how do we do it when the federal government has given up providing a range of services and it's over to the states and territories to provide them? So what needs to change in career programs and schools? It's a legislative requirement in Tasmania to provide for all students to have a pathway plan. So who uses the pathway plan to assist students in TAFE? Who uses the pathway plan in universities? Everybody I've asked said no, they don't use it. So there's no connections between what's being learnt and that plan going forwards. There is in lots of other countries, by the way. And you can see the Qantas call centre, we're buying in another 450 jobs. Is that what happens when you have countries changing like China and the Asian region, that we now purchase work? And what does that mean for us? Because that will make work more contingent. Back in the early 90s, I worked in Fiji, and I can remember the garment industry. They'd fly in a few containers of sewing machines, get a subsidy, and then they'd fly all those sewing machines out to, the Sudan or something like that, because 50 cents was far too much to pay per hour. So it is changing the way of working and how people track. The other thing that sort of interests me is, how is the middleman, as the middleman's being removed, how do we change things? We tend to use these kind of little check-in things. The one on the top left is, you notice there's no steering wheel there. It's like the driverless car Google were announcing the other day. And on the top right is this company intrigues me. It's called Sneaker Boy. It's in the back of Myer in Melbourne. They were an online company who's now set up in retail. But you can try on the shoes, but you can't buy them there. You can have to download the app to purchase, and then they deliver to you. How are we preparing people for retail when that's retail? And is that the future of retail? And what should we know about retail when it's quite different? I spoke to the people who were running it. They were very cool-looking people. The shoes were like a pair of runners, $2,000. I think you've got to be kidding. I think you've got to be kidding. $200. That's, anyway, they did have a $200 pair. It didn't look very good. But anyway, so you can see how that's happening, this virtual kind of world. And in May 2013, 51% or nearly 5.5 million Australians aged 18 and over were digital workers, using the internet to work away from the office, and that was according to the Australian Communications and Media Authority. So we have that situation in which we're already, most of us are doing some of our work online. The UK, for example, is saying if we can't implement a program, then it's digital by default. So this is the kind of little things which are occurring. And are we giving the right careers advice when this is the reality of what a lot of people will face? A guy called Reid Hoffman has set up LinkedIn. He wrote a book called The Startup of You. It's a very interesting book. I think it's a good careers book, really. It talked about, this is the process in a modern environment. We need to be constant explorers. We need to figure out and understand what's going on in the landscape that we're interested in, to adapt to that, to network, adapt again, and then implement. It's a simple model. So are we thinking, are we creating good explorers? Are we creating the kind of explorers we need for this marketplace? So here's the definition of career development, the process of managing life, learning and work over the lifespan. Not just at one point in time, but again and again as people have to make changes. There was an OECD review which said the career development services assist people at any age, at any point throughout their lives to make educational and occupational choices and to manage their careers. So this piece of work is being used in very different ways in different countries. And I'll get to that in a minute. The elements of good a career development framework came many years ago, but still applies. What do we know about ourselves? What are our values that underpin the work that we do? What are the interests that we're in that we might want to look at next? What are the skills we need, or what are the skills we've got that we want to use? What's our ethical position? What's our story, the story we tell about our career? And when you look at people's resumes, often they've told a very different story to the one they want to tell. And revitalising that resume to reflect what they actually want to use can be quite empowering. The big issue is around readiness. Lots of people, when you think this work for the dole program, I had a look at the tender the other day, $220,000 in Launceston, no training provision, no careers advice, no readiness. Where are they going next? So there's been some work in Florida and Canada if you can, work out where the gaps are in an individual's level of readiness, you can deal with it very cheaply and effectively. The program in Canada that I've been looking at worked out they got a 25% improvement in employment outcomes by simply teaching people to interrogate the labour market information and labour market intelligence in 4 20-minute sessions. Very simple. This is how it works. Lots of people don't know how this thing called a labour market actually works. Opportunity awareness, people might call it what they like, but exploring that and understanding how that works and being able to decide. A lot of people that I come across initially aim for second best. I really wouldn't mind doing this, but I'm not good enough to that, so I'll try for this. I'll be a taxi driver. Not that there's anything wrong with being a taxi driver, but you might be talking to an engineer, So it's what Reid Hoffman talks about is having a plan A and a plan B. The plan A you might need to do for the time being, and the plan B that you might have as a hobby until it becomes plan A. So it's an interesting concept. Self-awareness is key. If you don't get that part right, it's very hard for people to explore what they want to do next. The evidence for good career development in education is that it improves, if you do it right, if it's effective, if there are enough resources, there's good engagement, improves goal setting, increased understanding of educational options, support for individuals to consider vocational options, and support for effective transitions from universities, and support for adults to consider their return to education. They're reasonable things. And similar for work, improved employment outcomes, improved matching, improved job search skills. Some of the programs that the federal government are closing are actually going over to Job Services Australia, and the job JSAs aren't particularly well funded to do the career development services they need to do this. So that's the kind of evidence that the governments could use to leverage career development activity going forward, because this is the nature of career, I guess. We're kind of balancing, we're plate balancers. We're working in a more uncertain environment. The little red line that said we're going to go linearly doesn't go that way very easily. We need to have a good, clear understanding of what we have to offer, who needs what we have, how to add value, and how can they get there. Some of the reforms that the government have introduced in the budget include a broadening of provider choice, but less investment in the system. Additional support through scholarship programs for disadvantaged students, uncapping of support. They say Commonwealth funding to all Australian higher education students enrolled in a registered non-university higher education institution, 80,000 places. No limit on fees. Melbourne have said that they're going to put up theirs potentially by up to 60%. No limit on how many courses you can do, and a new Commonwealth scholarship scheme, and a trade support loans program for apprentices, but a removal of the tool allowance. It's very interesting when you think about a government that wants to build jobs, but actually is it doing the same for human capital? These are the programs that the government is giving up on. That I think in some ways the Job Guide, which went to every school, My Future, which had 2 million users, Youth Connections program, a program that works with disengaged young people across the country, School Business Partnerships, which links schools to business, Experience Plus for mature age workers, and the others. It's fairly substantial. The time is now really to begin to design what it could look like next. This building is in Seoul. It's called Job World. It holds 70 different occupations. 100,000 young people go there a month. 1.3 million in its first year of operation. They're increasing the number of jobs available, and in addition to that, they've put in an additional 5,000 career educators within the school system, because what the Korean government want to do, they want to move their people from being functional kind of workforce to a creative workforce. And this is just one of them, this $200 million building. I'll give you a look at it. It's in Korean, so I can't translate, I'm sorry. Did you get the picture?
직업을 통해 세상을 이해한다. 직업 세계관. 직업의 의미와 가치를 통해 직업을 이해하는 곳, 직업 세계관입니다. 다양한 직업이 서로 연계되어 있음을 깨닫고 역사적 흐름 속에서 변화하는 직업의 세계를 알아.
미래의 나를 만나보자. 청소년 체험관. 다양한 직업들을 경험해보고 나에게 맞는 직업을 선택. 미래의 내 모습을 미리 만나볼 수 있는 체험 공간입니다. 사람들의 편의와 복지를 위해 일하는 직업이 자리한 공공서비스의 거리. 조종사, 승무원이 되어 이륙에서 착륙까지 항공인의 업무를 수행해보고 종합병원 수술실의 의사와 간호사가 되어 소중한 생명의 불씨를 살려내는 경험을 해볼 수 있습니다. 우리 사회의 경제 생활을 유지하고 발전시켜 나가는 직업들을 경영 금융의 거리에서 만나볼 수 있습니다. 광고와 무역, 증권회사 등의 직업 공간 속에서 전문인이 되어봅니다.
That's right. I'll just so you can see how some countries are taking quite a different approach. Imagine if we had a Mona and a job world here. You know, if we brought an extra 100,000 tourists, that it was a career development-led recovery for the state. But that's what's actually happening. What I like also in countries like Denmark, that's Denmark City Hall. There are 20 career counsellors working out of that hall. All young people in Copenhagen are tracked to the age of 25 to make sure they're in education, school or work, or supported through that process. It's a very different kind of approach in which local government, regional centres are given support to do that kind of work. It's quite exciting, really. Job world and this approach. It's a kind of a quantum leap from where we're going with the sort of advice we're giving. Not only that, they have services for adults also throughout their lives. In Germany, those services are provided by employment services. In New Zealand, you can see career-capable communities. There was a town called Otoahunga, and in Otoahunga they realised they were losing businesses and they were losing young people. And what they decided, they'd join the dots. They called them camp mothers. They'd used these kind of leaders to bring all of the different organisations together to work out how we'd solve this problem of providing jobs for young people with employers who wanted them, and then work very effectively. It's a bit like what John Buchanan was saying yesterday in terms of Narrabri, but it is a program that is now in 4 centres, and it is something that they're working on to see whether they can do it better. Because by 2030, New Zealand, 30% of their entire workforce will be Maori or Pacific Islander, and they need to take an entirely different process to the kind of workforce. In Europe, they're saying, okay, these are the kind of elements of a lifelong guidance service. We need to think about that it's lifelong, that it's meaningful to the wider experience of individuals, that it recognises diversity, not just one intervention, but lots of different ideas. The practitioners are qualified. The people have access to good quality information, and it should be quality assured. So countries are saying, how can we do this better? How can we do it more effectively? How can we do it differently? If you think about Tasmania, the design ideas for Tasmania, in my view, is that I had a look at the number of youth organisations on the northwest coast. There were 21. Maybe 10 of them were providing resume advice. Is there a way to do that a little bit differently? So joining the dots, potentially regional hubs to create career-capable communities. Is that a possibility? Strong linkages to the labour market and labour market intelligence. How do we make sure that people get the right information at the right time? That we build capacity of teachers to use LMI more effectively. And then we build capacity across existing services. When I had a look at Scotland, they're using libraries and shop fronts to provide lots of career services, so existing resources providing higher quality services. There's no consistent brand about where people access information and resources. We need an improved integration between schools and VET and universities. We need to enhance the career education responsibilities and capacity building of pathway planning. Pathway planning is a very good program, but needs to be enhanced since they have reduced the size. A school like Glenora, which is on the back of New Norfolk, might get a pathway planner once a fortnight. There is room to do that more effectively so that the resource is there where it is needed in the schools that need it most, but it should be available to all. Greater employer involvement. There is people doing good work in that area, such as Beacon and Colony, with school business partnerships. But when they go, when school business partnerships end, how do we maintain that kind of system? Given the government's giving up online resources, should we do what Western Australia has done, which is create its own online resource system? One of the things that happens is that the kind of tools and assessments that are available to teachers and careers advisors and vet providers and RTOs is not necessarily the best. But there are good tools out there, and making sure that people are assessed for career readiness, supported to write a decent resume, one that might get them an interview, is quite important. Parents and how we support them. One of the things I like in the UK, for example, is a helpline that parents can access until 8 o'clock at night. And of course we need to strengthen access within the vet sector and group training areas for good career development advice. And like the ASIC program, Money Smart, we need to be able to collect data to, one of the things that they said, they go out to communities and say, how can we improve, what can we make for you? And I think our question ought to be, how can we make a better career development service for the people of Tasmania? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Just to enliven us, I've asked